The way that I've even been able to do what I've done is by trying to stay centered in my values. If I wasn't staying centered in my values, I would have veered off them by now and screwed over people, which I would never want to do. And so my values are what's allowed me to get to this point.
Welcome to the Build to Billions podcast, where we guide successful entrepreneurs and investors on their journey from millions to billions. And we believe that the key to scaling and compounding your wealth and life starts every single day with a mindset and practice of stewardship over ownership and applying billionaire biblical principles. Our ultimate goal is to help you scale and compound your wealth and life so you can give more, all of it away to help MVPs. My name is Brett Swarts. Each and every episode, we're joined by some of the best entrepreneurs, millionaires and billionaires, where they share their insights and wisdom with us. So we can level up on all of these areas. I'm excited about our next guest. He is the founder of STR Search, and he has successfully directed over $70 million of investments into strong cash flowing Airbnbs across the country. He's a master of complex data sets, and he has a 100% success rate across 150 plus properties for helping his clients acquire cash flowing Airbnbs, and so much more. Please welcome to the show with me, Mr. John, and I think is it Bianchi? How do you pronounce it?
Bianchi.
Bianchi. Okay, excellent. Hey, John, How are we doing?
Good. Yourself? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks so much for being here. And by the way, you can learn more about John by going to strsearch.com. It's strsearch.com. We're going to talk about how to cash flow Airbnbs. And so, but John, before we go there, would you give our listeners a little bit more about your story and your current focus?
Yeah, appreciate it. So I hyper-focused around Airbnb data. It was this one thing that I realized I did best when I was trying to build out an Airbnb business. I built up a certain number of Airbnbs out of the Chicago, Scottsdale kind of area, and then COVID came around and wiped that out completely. Just because if you had an Airbnb in a city during COVID, you pretty much had zero revenue coming in for a solid year. So I luckily was able to sell off the contracts of those Airbnbs. There was doing rental arbitrage and property management at the time. And then as I sort of walked away from managing Airbnbs, there was one thing that I realized I did best, and that was figuring out which property would be the best possible property to get to turn into an Airbnb. And if you're hyper focusing on cash flow as that metric, that was the one thing that I did really, really well. And so I wanted to hone in on that skill and get good at it. And I decided to apply to a couple of different positions where I knew I could work on that all day, every day. And so I ended up getting a contract with TechVestor, which is now the largest short-term rental investment fund in America. And I acted as their head of data for a 2-year period, still am their head of data. And in that time frame, I helped them acquire 145 plus properties. Every single last one of them is cash flow positive. From there, I broke my exclusivity contract with them and opened up my doors to be able to work with everybody and anybody. And so within the past 12 months, we've been able to help another like 60 plus people on top of that. So we're closing in on like 210 plus properties over the past 3 years that we've helped people acquire in the short-term rental space. And every single last one of them is cash flow positive. So the process that I wanted to hone in on and get really good at has been proven to be extremely successful in the time frame that we've been using it. So
okay, awesome. Let's dive right into that process. What would you say is the number one secret to cash flowing Airbnbs?
Just being able to understand the data and taking the time to actually go through the data that exists out there, right? So I'm not sure if you're like how much you've done, Brett, in the Airbnb space, but there's a site out there called AirDNA. Are you familiar with it by any chance?
I've heard of it, yeah.
Okay. So AirDNA is this site that actually allows you to be able to see how much every single Airbnb is making across the entire world for like $400 for the year, which is just absolutely insane. And so anyway, so you can see literally how much everybody's making, which is, I always find that nuts still to this day, because it's not like you can see how much every single subway is making around the world, right? If you could, you would be able to like handpick where the best one is to go. But with Airbnbs, you can't do that. So what you have to do is you have to be able to like just understand how to work with that data, take the time to build up the skill of being able to analyze it. And then when you've done that and got enough reps in, then you start to be able to see where the cash flow actually exists. And you're looking at good data. And then eventually you're going to come across property that has cash flow potential. Now, that's extremely high level. I can go into far more detail on that if you want me to break down the process. But what are your thoughts on that?
No, that's great. So you got to understand the data. You got to use, things like AirDNA that will give you the data, but you got to understand how to work with the data. So that's step number one. Okay, what's step number two?
getting in the reps, right? So what you want to do is you want to be able to find a market that's actually going to work out for you. So that's probably the next hardest thing that people are trying to do when they're trying to find an Airbnb. There's a ton of regulation issues right off the bat, and then a ridiculous amount of properties do not cash flow. Probably like 99% of all the properties that exist in America would not make a good Airbnb. And the reason being is because they're in markets where there's not a lot of travel demand. So those automatically are written off. And then there's other places where there is a lot of travel demand, but then the properties are too expensive to actually be able to cash flow. And I'm always going to use cash flow as sort of the metric as a metric for success, just simply because if a property cash flows, you're going to be able to continue to hold on to it for years, right? Obviously, there's the STR tax loophole, which allows you to be able to save a bunch of taxes and appreciation and principal pay down, which are all a bunch of additional benefits. But if the property cash flows, you can keep holding on to it for years. So the next metric that you want to do is be able to find a market that has good regulation. I always look for regulation that's already in place, that people are happy with the regulation in that market, and there's not really a fear of being kicked out of your Airbnb due to regulation that's coming down the line. Then from there, what I'm doing is I'm looking for properties in that market that could potentially meet what I call the 20% rule, which is a price to rent ratio within that market. So it's not cash on cash I'm referring to. I'm talking a price to rent ratio. So if I'm buying a $500,000 home, I want it to have the ability to make $100,000 a year. The revenue is 20% of the purchase price, right? And if you can find a property that meets those metrics, it's going to cash flow an amount that you're going to be really happy with, right? Now, from a very high level, when you're looking into the market, you're going to be able to, if you just look for that one metric over everything else, and if you can find it, you know that that's a market worth deep diving and truly building a buy box around it to break it down even further to be able to find the most optimal property to purchase within that market. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And so you got to make sure you have, you're getting the reps to understand the market, but in particular, you want to really know the travel demand and the expenses, how expensive that property you're going to buy, right? You got to look at those two things. Does it actually cash flow? And you use the 20% rule, which is you want about 20% of the revenue. In this scenario, if you bought a house for $500,000, it'd be $100,000 revenue. That's a good thing. And then the second thing, you want to make sure like there's not like people with pitchforks trying to shut down all these Airbnbs. You know, I think of like Shrek, you know, and they're marching in the streets. Yeah. You know, and because it's a thing, man. I mean, even where I live, recently these guys walking around in our community having to sign this petition to try to go to the our HOA board to restrict anything below 30-day rentals, right? He may say 6 months, actually, I think. And he knocked on the door and he wanted me to sign it. And I was like, well, you know, and it's not as if it's like, I'm not noticing it, right? But I guess someone in the neighborhood was doing it and it was bothering them. And so it becomes like this thing on the Facebook community site. But I'm like, well, what if someone wants to do that? Like, I mean, obviously you should make it like where they're not partying and keeping people up and being disturbances, but I don't know. I didn't sign it. I'm like, no, I don't, you know, I don't want to restrict someone from doing that. You know, we might want to do that in the future. I don't know. But you know, so is that what you're saying there? You just got to make sure that they're not, you know, just so restrictive.
Yeah, for sure. So, you know, your market's an interesting market. Have you talked about your market publicly?
No, we should talk about it. Let's go through it. This will be fun.
Yeah. So like St. Augustine is an interesting market where I believe this has been a bit since I've looked into it, but I believe it's a 1 week minimum rental for a good portion of St. Augustine. Okay. Not the beach, right? But the city. Because in the city, and I don't know that you would know this better. So you know how you have your downtown core in St. Augustine? Yeah. And then just south of that, there's a big, really beautiful neighborhood just south of downtown. Mm-hmm. What's that neighborhood called? Lincoln something?
Well, this Ponte Vedra, that's like the fancy, and that's, I think, a little bit, that's just north of it. Okay. I've been here for 2 years and we don't really go south of downtown. So, all right, okay. We're always like north and downtown or north or inland. So
right.
I don't know.
So anyway, there's a spot down there where it's really restrictive, right? If you could, that area, if you were to buy an Airbnb and if you could rent it out on a nightly basis, right, without having that restrictions, it would work really well. Like you could cash flow really easily, but because there's restrictions there, we've never advised anyone to buy in that area. Now, they're not enforcing it all that much, but because they've already said, like, no, it's got to be a week that people can stay there, like you can only rent it out 52 times, it's going to kill your ability to properly get it cash flowing, right? Because most people are going to stay for 3 nights, not 7 nights. And so now all of a sudden you just lost a huge amount of bookings that you could potentially get. So, and you could go in that market and rent it out nightly if you wanted to, but now you're just waiting for somebody to knock on your door and fine you and screw you over, and then that's not a good investment. You know what I mean? It's not a good way to strategically do it. Now, if you go to a market like, let's say, Gatlinburg, okay? Gatlinburg, I'm not sure how much you know about it, but it's the Smoky Mountains, and the entire economy there is built around tourism. And so there's thousands upon thousands of Airbnbs from Gatlinburg to Pigeon Forge to Sphereville, all around that area. If they restricted Airbnbs in that area, the entire economy of those towns would fall apart. So I kind of like thinking about the markets that we invest in as having that sort of level of protection around them, where if they got rid of it, their economy is screwed in a sense, right? So that's a helpful way to think about it. To go even deeper with St. Augustine, just because you're there, it's honestly a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful place, but the spot where you are allowed to rent it out is along the water, right? On St. Augustine Beach. The problem is the real estate's so expensive that you can't properly cash flow. Right. So the people who are acquiring those properties are people who just have those second homes. They're okay to break even. They're okay to lose a little bit of money. A lot of them nowadays are probably people taking advantage of the STR tax loophole, and then they save so much in taxes that they can lose, $20,000-$30,000 a year for the next 3 years and be completely fine.
Let's do that, dude, because some people don't know what it is. What's the STR tax loophole?
So it's a way for you. I'm not giving advice here whatsoever, and I feel like I get this screwed up every once in a while. I'm also a Canadian, so I haven't had to go through it myself, and I'm terrible with legalese, so I'm doing my best here. But my understanding of it is that with the STR tax loophole, if you were to get a property and meet certain requirements, which I can mention in just a minute, you're able to write off active income rather than passive income, right? So a lot of the incentives that exist out there allow you to write off the taxes that you make from passive activities. This is one that allows you to write off income from active activities, right? So if you have a W-2 and you're making, $250,000 a year and you got to pay 30% in taxes, you can actually write that off if you acquire an Airbnb. And now you're not paying that, you're keeping that, and you can reinvest it again, right? So it's been a very big thing that people have been doing. It ties in with bonus depreciation and cost segregations, something along those lines. I don't fully understand it. It started off with 100% depreciation. It dropped down to 80, then 60, and this year it's in 40. Next year it's supposed to go 20 and then completely zero out. However, Trump has said he's going to revert it back to 100 and reset the cycle. So, that's the STR tax loophole.
Awesome. No, I think it's well said. That's exactly what I've heard, understood, and that's really, the cost seg is when you can accelerate, the components and the real estate assets. You can do it for other assets too, but most people do it for real estate, multifamily. But in particular, why for short term is because it is active, and it can actually accelerate those hours where you typically do 750 hours. There's ways to do that. Check with your CPA. This isn't tax or legal advice. You got to make sure you get on that. But that is a cool way to consider that. So, okay, got it. Yeah. So you got to look at the expense of the place ratio versus the actual rentability, whether it's 7 days, 3 days, or whatnot. Got it. All right. So St. Augustine, Jacksonville may not be a great place. Now, what about places like Orlando? Like Orlando obviously is very touristy, right? But but there's probably a lot of competition with the Airbnbs. Like at what point do you're like, okay, it checks the boxes for expense and for rental less restrictions, but there's just too many Airbnbs at this point. So,
there being a lot of Airbnbs is not necessarily an indicator of being saturated.
Okay.
So now, with that being said, Kissimmee, that area around Orlando where everyone goes for the Disney World,
right,
is saturated. It is probably one of the worst places that you can invest in Airbnb in the entire country. Now, it used to be, so this is like a great tale of saturation. There's a whole story I've been studying Kissimmee for like 3 years. So I'm going to do my best to kind of summarize this.
Okay.
Before COVID, there's 60,000 Airbnbs in Kissimmee.
Okay.
After COVID, it drops down to 30. It's
Oh,
never actually picked back up to that 60,000. I think the max it ever went up to was about 38,000, right?
okay.
So huge drop off, huge comeback. Now you would think to yourself, well, if there was 60,000 before, I'm sure these guys are all doing great now because it's only 38, right? But with, the way Disney World is just so expensive and the way the economy is kind of feeling right now, that's where people stop traveling sort of first, right? If you think
Right.
about the way that people travel, the masses travel, not the affluent, but the masses, right? Disney World is like a once in a lifetime sort of trip. Like in Canada, if you got to go to Disney World as a kid, like your parents made it, you did great, you did well, you know what I mean? All those sort of things. And it was an amazing experience. But if you can't afford that, you then have to take that next option, which is maybe renting out an Airbnb that's in a beach area. And if you can't afford the cottage, you got to go to that next option, which is like you're going camping. You know what I mean? Because it's a lot cheaper.
Yeah.
And if you can't afford camping, like you're just going over to your grandparents and hanging out for a week, right? So it's sort of this like de-escalating scale. And I think Disney World is kind of getting hit with feeling it first. And so if Disney World is feeling less travel, then the people who are actually going to stay at the Airbnbs are going to be paying less. And bidding less because they can't afford it as much, right? So, anyways, that market is a really, really tough market. And on top of it, those properties fully doubled. So from 2020 to 2022, a full doubling. If it cost 400,000, it's now 800,000. It's not perfect and exact, but most people would not disagree with me there. So Kissimmee is a really, really difficult market. Now there's like 38,000 listings. With that being said, Miami has 22,000 listings, right? And so you might think to yourself, 22,000 listings, that might as well be 38,000 listings. You know what I mean? Like also a scary market to go to with that many people. If you were to take the amount of new listings that showed up on the market month over the past 2 years, and then how much the revenue in total for the market went up month by month for the past 2 years, and you put those side by side, that's your supply and that's your demand, right? And what you want is you want the demand to always outpace supply. So, 100 new listings come on, a whole bunch more revenue is getting made at a percentage that matches with the new supply. Now, if you look at Miami, it's been balanced for 2 years. And supply is just, or revenue has just outpaced supply the entire time, which is, to me, it's fascinating because I've been studying Miami forever and it's always scared me. But seeing that it's just been this perfectly balanced market, it's super interesting. We recently helped a client get a property in that market. And we were really, really, really specific about it because we have a perfect track record right now and I don't want to screw it up. So I spent a lot of extra time on it to make sure we got it right and did extra contingencies to make sure it was done properly. And so far it's been just blowing it out of the water, super profitable in a really, really short period of time. And so you take a market like Miami, which is also tons of listings, but perfectly balanced, and we can enter in there and still outcompete the people who exist currently with doing things better than they're doing it. So
absolutely love it. By the way, strsearch.com, strsearch.com if you want to connect with John. So let's talk about what you do, John. Like you say, it sounds like you help people identify, underwrite, plan, and execute on Airbnbs across the U.S. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, that's perfect summary. Yeah, I could sort of lay it out. We got 4 pillars. So for yourself, right?
Yep.
As an example, you say you're a busy professional, you got, over $200,000 saved up that you want to invest. You're looking to take advantage of the STR tax loophole. If you start with us, we're going to do 4 main things for you. 1, we're going to figure out which market makes most sense for you based off of your budget and your preferences, right? From there, we're going to figure out the properties within that market that once again meet your budget and preferences. And we're going to guide you through the whole thing, connect you with all the people you need to be connected with, things along those lines. Then you're going to get the property closed, and we're going to give you this entire blueprint of what you need to do to the property to drive the most amount of revenue. So like simple questions of like, hey, should I invest $10,000 into a hot tub? Is it needed for this market? Yes or no, right? And so we kind of create this list of things of what you need to do in order because everybody's working on a budget and they can't just throw a ridiculous amount of money at the property. And so we tell you like, this is what you need to do. Then we connect you with the designers, the construction companies, all those people who can bring that to life. And we kind of can guide you through that process. And then we get to that final piece, which is marketing. And this is the piece that everybody screws up left, right, and center. Every single last one of our clients is that they don't market it properly. So they have the best property in the best market, set up the most optimal way, and then it looks terrible on Airbnb. And so we help them revamp it to make sure that it looks beautiful and is marketed properly. And then from there, they're kind of on their own, or they're working with a property manager that we connected them with, or a revenue manager we connected them with. But it's essentially a service that helps people acquire good Airbnbs anywhere in the United States based off your budget and preferences.
Wow, that's incredible. So what market, what properties, closed property, the blueprint, design, construction, the details like hot tubs or, to put them in there, and then the marketing to make it beautiful. That makes sense. That's the turnkey way to get this thing up and running. Maybe give you do the Miami one, but maybe give another one too, where, someone puts $200,000 in, and let's say it takes 6 months to get all this up and running, right? And what kind of returns, what's the average purchase price of the house, and then what kind of, the management, like who's managing all this, right? Like, are you hiring the property management too, or walk us through that?
Okay, so handful of questions there. So the purchase prices have gone from 300,000 all the way up to like I think 1.75 or 1.8 million is the highest that we've helped somebody purchase. We really, really, really don't like going over $1 million. It gets super difficult to hit the numbers that you want to hit. Yeah. The cash on cash tends to be between 10 and 20%. That tends to be the area. Now we've definitely gone up higher, and we've been able to help people hit 25 to 30% on the high end. But we're always projecting low, mid, high, right? And I'm hyper focused on the low. And if your low has some good protection, then that's where we're okay. And it's also going to depend on, are you managing it yourself? Right. What other variables do you have that are going to be in there? Like, that's going to change your potential cash on cash. How much you putting into the property, how much you putting down on the property, all those things are going to change that. So take that with a grain of salt, right? Every person's situation is a little different. So that's the property ranges. That's the expectation ranges. What was the next part there?
Just like you see, so 10 to 20%. So I'm just doing something like the month. So if you buy a place for, you put $200,000 down on a $600,000 property, and so after debt service and all of these things, I'm just trying to get a feel for like the average monthly cash on cash return, even if you had property management, right? Like, just kind of feel like what are you kind of seeing out there?
Well, that one, the cash on cash is going to depend on the amount that you're putting towards the property. So it stays fairly relative to the amount of capital that you put in, right? So if you're putting in 200,000 or 400,000, your cash on cash is still going to fall within the same general range, but your cash flow will be higher, right? Am I able to share my screen on this?
I don't know. You can give it a shot. We'll see what happens here. I don't know if you can click it and try to share them. People on YouTube.
I think it's easier just to.
Yeah,
I don't like to BS. So
yeah.
Can you see this here?
Yeah, I've seen some stuff there. Yeah.
Cool. So cash flow here is $3,000 a month on that property. This one is $4,500 a month. I love this property. I wanted it so bad myself. This one here is the Miami one I was telling you about. $5,000 a month. This one here is $2,500 a month up in the Pocono region. Another one here around $3,000 a month and $32,000 in tax savings. I think you kind of get the idea. So it varies, but it's in this general range. And obviously it's not perfect month over month.
Yeah. So you put about 200 in and you're getting 3,000 to 5,000 a month. Is that a?
Yep. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, sure. Somewhere around that range.
Okay. And then plus if you get the STR, you get that, the tax, and let's say that's on average. Obviously the year, if the bonus and all that stuff, let's call it 20 to 30,000, maybe year one. And then you can probably get trickles down as you depreciate every year, right? Yes. I don't know exactly. I'm not perfect on that, but as it depreciates, you lose the ability to depreciate as you depreciate more and more every year. Yeah. So, okay, cool. All right, that makes sense. How about Las Vegas? What do you think of Vegas as far as the market?
Regulations don't allow for it. So yeah, they don't allow you to do it. I think North Las Vegas may allow it, but then the price to rent ratio, so like the amount that the homes cost compared to how much they can actually generate in North, don't actually work. Henderson is just south of Miami, and they do allow it, but they have a density rule, so you can't be within a certain distance of another home. And the only pocket that actually works really, really well is fully done. Like there's no room for another Airbnb in that area.
Got it.
So
Henderson, Nevada, right?
Say again, sorry?
You meant Henderson, Nevada, right? You said Henderson, Miami. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
South of Vegas, yeah. Got it. And what states do you like that you're like, okay, this state seems to be, I know it's probably micro. It's got to be more micro than just macro state, but are there like certain states you're like, okay, these states I feel like are good ones to look at?
So yeah, so what, I can definitely rattle off a couple of states. One thing that I can't do, just so you know, is talk about specific markets. I kind of I refuse to, just because we put a lot of clients into those markets, and then if I just start talking about it,
that makes sense.
We don't want to hurt our clients and their ability to hit those numbers. But states wise, like, we love the East Coast. The purchase price on the East Coast is awesome. The amount of travel within the East Coast is awesome. You've got markets like Florida has been one hell of a market to actually analyze left, right, and center, but love Florida big time. Pennsylvania is a great one too. New York is pretty solid in certain areas as long as you can avoid certain taxes that they have there. They got school taxes, which kind of ruin things. Arizona is good at a very high level. The whole state of Arizona allows you to be able to to rent out short-term rentals. You got like Virginia, West Virginia. Those ones are solid too. And those are like a lot of the core. There's a bunch of like micro markets. Like, when I say micro markets, where you can only buy like one or two. We know some of that in like Illinois and Michigan.
That's cool. That's good. That's good. The point is, you can't just do a whole state. You got to micro it down. So makes sense. And what can now talk about some capital gains tax, right? So like, you go to sell, right, and you blow, you get this massive gain on the sale. What have you found, or even like for like business sales, like, some people look at the 1031 exchange, and we offer an alternative to the 1031 exchange, but they get frustrated because they can't find that next property. They want to buy a property that they can fix up a little bit and then convert it into an Airbnb, right? And so they want to sell for 1.8 million, defer the tax, and then buy a couple different Airbnbs, right, to diversify again, different spots. So what have you found, or have you guys searched with when it comes to capital gains tax? How do you solve for that?
So we actually work a lot with people with 1031 exchange, because you have that 45-day window, and on average, we've done the math on all of our clients. They get under contract in 32 days. But I'm actually super curious. Could you break that down a little bit more for me? What's that alternative option to the 1031 exchange?
Yeah. So it's what we do here at Capital Gains Tax Solutions, where you don't have to have any 45-day 180 time frame or like kind replacement property, or even debt replacement, which can be a challenge. And I think times there's properties that are high, and then you can wait 6 or 12 months and get lower values to be able to negotiate or just find a deal. So we use a strategy called a Deferred Sales Trust, and it allows you to sell any asset of any kind, business, Bitcoin, real estate, defer all the tax, and then invest into whatever you want at any time, all tax deferred. So for example, we said a $16 million business exit for a client out of Oregon, they had a dental practice, and they had zero basis. They were to pay about 30% in tax on the gain. And so they were to defer it all. And now we're in the process of buying properties, buying some multifamily. They're looking at an Airbnb, they're looking at, but there's no timing restrictions, right? And then we've also done with Bitcoin, where we had a client exit 5 million of Bitcoin. She bought it at 50,000 and went to 50 million, and she exited 5 million of that. She started a business with that. It happened to be like an online kind of Khan Academy, educational academy. We've done it with real estate mostly. In fact, we just did a $17 million land exit out of Texas for 2 clients. And we just did one up in New Jersey for a business sale. So basically, you can sell, you can defer the tax, but the best part is you can put it right into Airbnb, all tax deferred. You can put it into lending, you can put it into stock market, you put it into whatever you want. And you don't have any restrictions of the timing like the 1031 exchange.
I'm fascinated by this, because I don't know why I haven't heard about this. Everyone talks about the issues with the 45 days, but nobody's talked about this solution.
Yeah, so we have it. We also came out with the best 1031 exit plan, where you can go for a regular 1031. If it doesn't work out, you can ours saves the rest of it, right, or all of it. So we provide both. Quick background: I started at Marcus and Millichap, helping people buy and sell investment real estate and multifamily properties. This is in 2006. The market crashed in 2008. And then we're like, wow, we wish we had a solution for these people who just overpaid for these properties, and then the debt, resets and they lose it all. It's like, it just doesn't make any sense, right? Why can't you just sell high and buy low when it makes sense, and pay off your debt? And so this is what we figured out. You can pay off your debt, you can get tax deferred, you can buy when you want. Like, it's literally the Netflix to the old Blockbuster 1031. And the best part, like, for a lot of people, like, they want to sell the business or the Bitcoin or the stock, or the primary home. And those are all not 1031 eligible. ours works for all of those. And then you can go into the Airbnb or you can go into the whatever you want. Like you can diversify. Like it's so cool. Whereas at 1031, you have to sell real estate to buy real estate. And it has to be investment real estate. And it has to be 45 days and, and it has to be equal or greater value. And all of these basically blockbuster boxes it puts you in. And they're like, well, why don't you just use the Netflix version, which is what we have here. So this is what we do.
We're going to have another conversation about this because I talk to people all the time. Like I'm not even kidding. Right before we got on this call, there's somebody who just exited out of business, has 1.5 million. And I've got another lady who has 2 homes down in Kissimmee, which I told her to not buy 2 years ago. And she ended up buying them. And now she has already bought 3 homes with us. And she's like, hey guys, obviously this is working. So I'd like to 1031 exchange these other ones and be able to buy more Airbnbs. Right. Mm-hmm. Yep. Now, mind you, like maybe a 1031 makes sense for her in that scenario, but maybe it doesn't. Maybe it makes sense to go your route instead.
Well, the cool thing is they can go for the 1031 if it works out. They don't need to use our service, right? Like you got it. Like we're that backup plan. It gives the buyer leverage and peace of mind to know if it doesn't work out and the seller won't give them a fair deal. Because sometimes you get into a deal and there's like hair all over it. Like you're like, this thing's a mess. Like we didn't see the mold, we didn't see the foundation or whatever. And then they're like, well, you can buy it or you can pay your tax. Like actually, no, I don't have to buy it, Mr. Seller. I can go. I have the best 1031 exit plan, or I can I'm working with capital gains tax solutions. We can solve that and we'll come back in 6 months when you don't sell it and we'll get the actual price that makes sense. So this is what we empower our clients to be able to do. And we did a $6 million exit out of Texas where the client actually found $3 million worth of exchanges, which was perfect. And the other $3 million he put into our source. So sometimes it's both. Like you're not just, you don't have to choose just one or the other. Yep. And so we have all the stories and all the stuff, but happy to help. We just want to be able to hit the flow of capital for people to get freedom and impact with what they want to do. And housing is a big part of what we want to provide, whether that's, travel housing or just attainable housing for people. This is like the world we're in.
Yeah, we just have so many people who we talk to where they're like, yeah, I'm considering a 1031 exchange, but I'm just nervous about the 45 days. And we're always like, we're the solution for that because of how fast we can move. But if we could combine what you're doing with what we're doing, they get more time, more than they would ever need. And then they can take their time to be able to get the right property. Because a lot of people are in bad properties, like especially Airbnb people. There's so many people in bad properties.
Yeah. You got it. One little caveat just says, no, we want at least $1 million net proceeds, $1 million gain is our minimum, unless you have 2 at $500,000 each. Yeah. So, just be aware of that. Like if we've done deals less than $1 million, but they combine, they stacked multiple of them. But the advantage of stacking multiple one of them, is you can consolidate the equity, and that could be one big purchase for, a $3 million deal. Gotcha. Right. So you could sell 500 at different times, different locations, consolidate the equity. You get a promissory note. This is how this thing works. You get a promissory note for the, $500,000 deals. Now you have 1.5. Now you can take a big chunk of that for a big $3 million, if you wanted to go that route, or a couple $1 million deals. Like it's just way more flexible. So people want to learn more, you go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. We've also got the book, Building a Capital Gains Tax Exit Plan with Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank. You can check that out on Amazon. It was an Amazon best-selling book, which is pretty cool. And again, it's Building a Capital Gains Tax Exit Plan, capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. Okay. That being said, Mr. John, are you ready for the lightning round?
Let's do it.
All right. Knowing what you know now, if you go back to your 20-year-old self, what's the one golden nugget? Make sure to tell yourself to do.
To figure out how to do more joint venture deals in real estate.
Nice. Question number 2. What's the number one book you recommend or gifted the most in the past year?
Oh, the past year. Atlas Shrugged.
Okay, perfect. And what are you most curious about right now?
How to do JV deals at scale.
I like it. Love it. And then the next question is number one leadership quote or theme that you strive to live by. Leadership specifically.
I don't know if I have an exact quote that I actually live by, so I can't really give you one, but I try to just be the person that people would want to look up to, follow, and work with. You know what I mean? So I got a lot of people on my team. I want them to all trust and believe and want to work with me to build what we're trying to build. And so I'm just trying to be that person and show up as that person on a day-to-day basis. Right.
Yeah. Love it. Next question. Number one way you're using ChatGPT or AI?
Just to make myself sound not like an idiot when I write something. So
Yeah, it just takes a lot more effort to get everything eloquently, punctuation and all the things. And if you just talk into the chat GPT on the phone and tell him to help you write the email or the Instagram post or whatever, and then literally like go to your laptop or your computer and refresh it, and then you copy and paste it there, and it's in the email. Like I literally save, I call it hours a day. Like just in my energy, it feels like, because I'm like, okay. And it's just, I'm better at talking than I am like typing on a computer. Right. So it's just natural. So I couldn't agree with you more. Okay. Last question. So last question, after all your success, helping all the people you help, how do you best stay centered in your values and also encourage to charge forward to reach even higher heights?
The way that I've even been able to do what I've done is by trying to stay centered in my values. If I wasn't staying centered in my values, I would have veered off them by now and screwed over people, which I would never want to do. And so my values are what's allowed me to get to this point. So it's kind of a tricky question to answer. And then what was the second part to that question?
The second part is how do you stay encouraged to charge forward to reach even higher heights after you've accomplished so much?
Life can be boring if you don't find challenges in life. I feel like you can veer off into paths that you don't want to be. And so I treat life as almost like this one big game. And every single day I'm just trying to take the bull by the horns and figure it out and push myself a little further and do a little bit better and be a little bit more and everything along those lines. And that's just genuinely how I see life, as this really long, fun game that we get to play. And the higher levels that you play it at, the more fun it becomes, and the more because it's more challenging, it becomes more fun. And I just love that sort of mindset. It kind of keeps me moving in the right direction at all times. And so that's kind of what I remind myself on a day-to-day basis.
Hey, John, it's been more than a pleasure having you on the show. I want to encourage you to keep using your gifts and talents that bless people to help them create passive income and also provide housing for people that are traveling within Airbnb or rentals. Keep doing it. It's been awesome. It's been a great. Thank you for dropping your wisdom and your insights. For our listeners who want to get in touch with you, would you remind one last time what's the best place for them to find you?
STRsearch.com.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Also want to thank all of our listeners for listening to another episode of the Capital Gains Tax Solutions Podcast, also on Build to Billions podcast. In fact, it's the same podcast if you didn't know that already. We stream the exact same thing, different intros, but our goal is still the same, to help you create and preserve more wealth and also live with a mindset of stewardship over ownership so you can make a bigger impact. You can build your wealth and your business from millions to billions so you can give more, all of it away to help MVPs. Appreciate you listening to this episode. Please share, rate, review, subscribe. And if John or I can be of service to you, let us know. And of course, if you're exiting in highly appreciated assets, get the book. Go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. Schedule a one-on-one consultation with myself, one of my team members, to walk you through your options. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.